I'm Rachel Bevilacqua with Sanare Today, and we're now on week 3 of our 8-week series. Last week we discussed areas of control with regard to the CBT model, and this week we're going to go a little bit more in depth on behaviors. Last week we talked about how behaviors we have 100% control over, which sounds great and everything, except when I'm depressed or I'm really overwhelmed, the idea of functioning just sounds overwhelming. So behaviors, I don't feel like I have so much control over them. So what we're going to do this week is kind of take a step back and look at, well, what do I mean by behavior change? I don't mean when you're depressed, go out and take a jog and you're going to feel a lot better, or go and start socializing, you'll feel a lot better. The idea is, how can I move just a little bit? How can I make the intensity of my depression or anxiety just a little bit less intense? It's not going to get rid of the depression and anxiety, but it can relieve it just a little bit. So we're going to talk about just 2 concepts today. One I call the pause technique, which I've talked about in a previous video, and another one is more accountability and goal setting. Both of which could be used for either depression or anxiety. I'm going to emphasize each of them separately though. So more for anxiety. Let's think of when I'm anxious. My heart rate is typically increased. My mind is racing. I've heard therapists a lot of times say, well, just breathe or walk yourself through those thoughts or challenge those thoughts. Those concepts make a lot of sense when we're not in a state of panic. When you're about to have a panic attack, processing what I'm thinking doesn't really make any sense at that point. So if I'm too elevated, pause techniques can come in handy. Basically what a pause technique is, something that changes any one of our senses, which I have listed here. So either smell, taste, touch, sight, or hearing. Research shows though that when you're changing one of those senses, especially when we're in a panic, you want it to be quick and rapid. So you want to approach one of these techniques that makes really quick changes in your brain, not something that you have to process. I don't know if you've ever tried listening to music or watching TV, how easy it is to be thinking at the same time while you're doing that. So I wouldn't emphasize these 2 if you're in a state of panic. If you're on your way, they might be effective. I would emphasize any of these 3. Smell seems to be the most immediate process in your brain, so anything that's a significant smell. So I don't know if you've ever had Indian food cooking in your kitchen. That's a very strong smell. Good smell, but strong smell. So it's something that can switch in your brain really quickly. Something like taste, if you've ever eaten a lemon or a lime or a really sweet drink, that could be something that would just kind of shift your mind. Same thing with touch, if you're touching anything that's a textured object or a different temperature object, that would be something. The idea behind pause techniques is, it sounds really silly, you're like, why would I even do that? The idea is to shift the sensation in your body. When you're extremely anxious or overwhelmed, your body feels like it's freaking out. The idea is to be able to kind of snap you out of it just for a second so that you could have a chance to redirect that thought process. Again, it will not get rid of your anxiety, but it will give you a second to actually invest in something different than your headspace. As far as depression goes, sometimes we're already down here. So pause techniques aren't always going to kind of bring us up here. It's more so to kind of bring us down. So one thing that's helpful with depression with regard to behaviors is accountability and goal setting. A lot of times I hear clients say, I'm setting this goal to get out of bed in the morning, or I'm going to brush my teeth today. And it sounds like, seriously, that's an accomplishment? And I hear you on that. But the thing that we want to look at is if we're trying to change something and we're choosing not to because it doesn't sound like it's a big enough success, we're kind of just staying stagnant. So the idea is, can I set a goal? So maybe that's going to get the mail today, or making a meal today, or whatever that might be, something that you think is attainable. And once we can do that, it just shifts you a little bit more in the direction that you want. Doesn't keep you stagnant, even if we end up back there by the end of the day. The idea is that I'm changing my experience just a little bit. We're not changing the whole experience, because remember, behaviors are only 1/3 of our entire experience, but it's changing a part of it. Accountability and support is a really helpful thing as well with either one of these things. So incorporating family or friends that would be helpful in reminding you these things would be a really good technique to use as well. So for the next week, I want you guys, if you experience more anxiety, I would like you to try one of these pause techniques that I gave you, and you can look online at my older videos to look for some more examples. Or if it's more of a depression and you really feel like you can't do anything, I want you to pick one thing that you could do and maybe identify some supports that could help you with that. And next week we're going to be going a little bit more into thought processes and how you can emphasize control over those. We'll see you next week.